All right, everyone. This segment, I hope it doesn't come across as pretentious as it feels the moment I just hit this record button. I prepared this episode with good intentions, and it's more of like a welcoming arms topic. Because look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've made it as a comedian. Absolutely not. I barely call myself a comedian. There's no more embarrassing yet flattering moment than when someone sees me and they recognize me as a comedian, which I'll take it. I mean, I've worked hard for 7-8 years trying to perfect my craft, and I can hold my own, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've made it as a comedian. What I do want to do is give 5 tips for people who are thinking about getting into comedy for the first time. People who have never been on stage or have only been once or twice, and if you're thinking about getting into it, by all means, I support you doing it. These are just some tips that I would give you based off of mistakes that I've made, experiences I've had, and things that I've watched with other new beginners. So I'm just going to go over these 5 things. Again, not trying to be a pretentious douchebag. I'm not holding myself above you. I'm trying to help. I'm extending a hand to say, hey, let's do this together. So here are 5 tips for anyone considering getting into stand-up comedy. The first one, number 1, you can learn it, but no one can teach it to you. Look, I see advertisements for comedy classes. I understand that you can probably teach someone how to write a joke, and you can teach someone about stage techniques and everything like that. But the problem with taking a comedy class is whoever is teaching the classes is teaching the way that they know how to do it and what works for them. And what works for them might not be what works best for you. Comedy is subjective, not only to the audience, but to the performer. And if I told you right now to think of your 3 favorite comedians right now, you could probably give me 3 names, and I guarantee you all 3 of those comedians are different. They're different in their delivery, they're different in their writing, they're different in their presentation, they're different. And the only way you're going to learn what makes you a successful comedian is to get on that stage and become a comedian. So you can learn it by doing it, but I don't think anyone can actually teach you what you need to know to be a comedian, which leads me to my next point. So this is point number 2. Don't write with someone else's voice in your head. Look, if you're considering getting into comedy, you probably have a few favorite comedians. There's always one that resonates with you the most. And you almost have an inner dialogue in your head, and that's the voice you hear. And whoever that is that you're thinking of when you write your comedy down, I promise you, what's working for your favorite comedian is not going to work for you. For example, let's say your favorite comedian is Brian Regan, and when you're writing your jokes down, you can hear Brian Regan's voice saying your words. And you go up on that stage and you say those words with the way you can hear them in your head, but with Brian Regan's voice, it's not going to work. The world already has Brian Regan. In order for you to be successful at stand-up, you have to figure out how to be you. Which leads me to my next point. However it sounds in your head, it's going to sound different coming out loud. Comedy is one of those things that you can't just practice. It's not like an instrument where you can just practice in your room, or like a sport like basketball where you can go shoot 500 jump shots in a day, and then eventually, whether guitar or sports, whatever, you get to present your abilities to the public. No. The only way to practice your abilities is to present them to the public in comedy. That's where you practice, is on stage. And the only way to improve is to do it to the public. So before you get on stage, make sure you're saying the words out loud by yourself so you can hear what it actually sounds like. Get used to hearing your own voice, because when you say it into a microphone, it's going to sound different. And it's going to present differently than how you're picturing it. And do your best to not have any expectations of how the crowd should react, because whatever you say, you have no control over the crowd's reaction. You don't get to choose what they think is funny, just like you don't get to choose what kind of toppings they prefer on a pizza. Point number 4, you're going to be blinded by the light. I was not prepared for how bright the light is. The first time I got on stage, and the moment that light hit me, everything I had prepared to do went right out of my head, and the rest of the time I was on stage went horrible. It will catch you off guard. So as best as I can warn you, the light is very, very bright. And the last point I'm going to give to you, and this is probably the most important one, number 5, give yourself permission to suck. Look, you're gonna bomb, and you're gonna bomb hard. Maybe not your first time. Maybe the first time you get up, it'll go amazing. And maybe not even the second or the third time, but eventually someone's gonna light your fuse and you're going to bomb, and you're gonna bomb hard. And it will be the worst feeling you've ever had. And you'll be driving home feeling more embarrassed than you've ever felt. And when you try and go to sleep at the end of the night, you're going to close your eyes and hear the silence in your bedroom, and it will be way louder than the silence you heard in the room when you bombed. And the crappy part is, that's going to happen more than once. Think about the law of averages. Everyone bombs. The more times you perform in stand-up comedy, the more times you will bomb. But the more times you bomb, the more you will learn how to avoid bombing. And the more time you perform stand-up comedy, the more all of these things that I've talked about are going to connect. You're going to learn to start thinking for yourself with your own voice rather than whatever famous comedian you're thinking of. You start to learn who you are on stage, and you start to understand your writing style, and you start to understand your strength. And eventually you get to this point where when you think of a joke, you don't even hear the laughter in your head. You can feel the laughter in your body. You know when you've written something that's going to work. But until you get to that point, it's essentially throwing dull darts at a spinning globe, hoping that any of them stick at any point. Now, everyone wants to be a fighter until they get hit. And comedy is one of those businesses where you're going to get hit, and you're going to get hit hard, and you're going to get hit a lot. The question is, after you've been hit, who's coming back for more?